Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second of today's webinars from Smart Vision Europe. And in this second webinar, we're looking at data cleaning with IBM SPSS Statistics. In the previous webinar, we were looking at just introducing SPSS Statistics and just showing you some of the basic functionality. If you haven't joined any of these sessions before, however, if you've joined this one and you haven't seen any of the other sessions, you should just be aware that we do record these sessions, and there's some slideware, not a great deal. Most of it's demonstration, but we will email out a link to you so you can download a PDF of it afterwards. If you think it's particularly useful for colleagues who are unable to join, then if you want us to rerun it on a private basis and you get enough of them together, the best thing to do is just send us an email and ask us, and we'll see if we can do that. With regard to asking questions, all the lines are muted, so we ask you to use the chat panel. And if we run out of time, we will follow up with you offline, which we do on a regular basis. We usually have people reaching out to us after these sessions, sending emails and so forth, just asking questions that have occurred to them afterwards. Or if it's, if it's a more nuanced or complex question, it takes a bit of time for them to formulate a question, that sometimes they prefer to, to email us afterwards. I'm Jarlath Quinn. I'm an analytics consultant with Smart Vision. I'm actually joined online today by my colleague Rachel, and Rachel just making sure that everybody's logging in correctly and keeping an eye on the chat facility, so she can, and she will try and answer questions as we're going along as well. If you don't know who Smart Vision are, we are a partner to IBM. And we're a gold accredited partner to IBM, as well as a company called Predictive Solutions and Data Robot. And we are a company that specializes in statistics, data science, machine learning, AI, big data technologies, all that kind of stuff. We do work with original equipment manufacturing, i.e. off-the-shelf software, but we also work open source software like R and Python and Spark. And we're a relatively small organization, but we all have very deep knowledge of statistics, analytics, predictive modeling, machine learning, and all that sort of stuff in data science, stretching back decades, way back to the early 90s. In particular, the overlap between us all is we've all been members of the senior team at SPSS UK, so that we've known each other since the 1990s. And that means that we're pretty much experts in all things related to SPSS, and it means that we've got lots of experience of applying SPSS and other tools, it has to be said, and other applications to many different sectors and many different topic areas across the last 30 years. I personally worked for SPSS for a long time, until we got acquired, from 1995 until we got acquired by IBM in the first decade of this century. I think it was 2008, something like that. And then I worked for SAS for a while, if you were who SAS Institute are, as an analytics consultant. So we know a lot about this kind of stuff. Suffice to say, that means that anybody that works with data, and works with particularly data analysis, and works with particularly with data that's been collected with other things in mind other than analysis, that you are going to encounter problems in the data and things which need to be addressed. So data cleaning is an almost universal problem for anybody who works in that area. And errors and problems in data can occur for a myriad number of reasons. I'm not going to labor the point, but it's not just mistakes that people make. It's not just things like, they put in a typo. They wanted to type in M, but they typed in, V or something like that. You do get inconsistencies over time in how people record information, particularly on operational systems. If you're looking at sort of staffing system or something like that, or how people record contact, or how they record events or something like that, you may find that formatting changes between different data entry operators, but also over time as things become less irrelevant. So you get a lot of non-applicable events and non-applicable rows of data which aren't necessary. You need to deal with them. Sometimes it's just something that happens where you're trying to match data. You get mismatches. You're trying to match, let's say something like transactions. You're looking at all the transactions in a transactional database and match them to customers. And you find that you get transactions that can't find a customer to go with them, or you get customers where you can't find transactions to go with them, or you get duplicate customers. Or you get problems of how different systems and code represent data. Particularly often when you're importing data from, other systems like CSV files, or maybe it's from uh, Excel or workbooks or databases or non-native formats. You find that how they encode things like date and time or how they represent numerical data may vary, and it has to be addressed in whatever application you work with, not just SPSS. So typical things you're going to end up doing in data cleaning is things like identifying records that just have so many missing values that there's not really much use to them, or fields that have so many missing values that really can't really use it, or fields which have so much variability that you can't really do much with it. A field like product number. If you're talking about like a supermarket where it has a line number or a SKU product value. I mean, there's so many of them. It's going to be, it might be 100, 200,000 different categories in there. You might not be able to do much with that particular field because it's just so varied. Or sometimes there's too little variability where 99.9% of the data all belongs to one group. Or you get stuff where data is out of range. You get people who are clearly can't be 199 years old or can't have had their car for -3 years or something like that. Or you get duplicates. That's a problem to have to deal with. Or very often with SPSS in particular, you're going to get variables or fields which are incorrectly formatted. So you get stuff which are strings that you want to be numbers. So it thinks it's a character string. And character string data, that's data that usually typically involves letters, A, B, C, D, E, something like that, people's names, emails. You often can't do much with them analytically, and you'll often have to turn them into numeric data in some fashion to work with them. Or you'll find that, the data is actually perfectly valid. It looks perfectly fine, but they contradict each other. So you get people who are car drivers who are, 12 years old or something like that, or 56-year-old men who are pregnant, that type of thing. So it doesn't make sense. And the other thing you might have to do is you might have to create syntax to clean the data automatically. Sometimes you're doing that because you're going to be doing it on a regular basis, and we'll talk on about syntax. But sometimes because just the power of syntax to be able to copy and paste the same procedure over and over again, and maybe search and replace a name in it or a name of a field, means that you can accomplish a lot more procedures automatically by simply copying and pasting the same repetitive task over and over again than you would if you were manually doing that and manually going through and clicking on things. So these are typical tasks, and we're going to touch on each of these tasks as we go through it. So I've broken the problem, the sort of problem area, if you like, into two categories, which is problems with how the data has been formatted or imported. So when you read the data and you say that doesn't look right, or that, I need to change that, or that field name makes no sense, or there's a value in there which should be defined as missing or not applicable or something like that, or I can't tell what those categories mean. I need to attach a label to them to explain what they are. And problems with the data itself, actual errors, irrelevant records, or records which are outside of the scope of the analysis, inconsistencies, duplicate rows, illogical relationships. So we're going to start with the first problem, which is problems of how the data has been formatted. And if I skip out to SPSS now, I should be able to see the SPSS screen. What we've got is a fairly innocent looking file. This is a file I work with a lot. It's called the employee data set. I used it in the last webinar that we did. It actually ships with SPSS. It's a sample data file. It's a really good data file to work with because it's got a good story behind it. As I said in the last session, it was used in a court case. But it's also a really good data file because most people understand it. Each row represents a different employee, happens to be a bank, and it's got a nice mix of field types in it. It's got numeric fields, it's got category fields, and you can do a lot of exploration and analysis, and we use it a lot because we can demonstrate a lot with it. So here I've got a version of it which I've deliberately introduced a plethora of problems with it, just a whole bunch of problems that are typical you might need to address. So the first thing I'm going to deal with is just a field name issue here. We have a field here that's labeled var001. It is not unusual when you're working with SPSS to import data from another system and find that it's, instead of the field names coming across For whatever reason, the field names weren't present. So it just calls things var 001, var 002, var 003, which means variable 1, variable 2, variable 3, or field 1, field 2, field 3. And if you create a new field, for example, in SPSS, you just double click and you created a new field from scratch, it would automatically call it var 001 or var 002. So if I just want to change that in field name, I mean, obviously one way in which I can do that is I can double click on the field header and that jumps me to the variable view, which then allows me to change that field name there. I could change it to, you know, emp group or something like that, or emp stat, something like that, which means employee group or job title or something like that. And that's easy to do. But if you've got a whole bunch of these that you need to change in one go, you might want to use syntax to do it. So it turns out that a lot of the procedures to kind of do things like label things and apply missing values and reorder and change the formatting and rename, those commands are really simple in syntax, and I'd encourage you to look them up. You can just Google them and see what the command is. But if, for example, here, if I just started a command here and I'd said wanted to rename this, it's literally rename variables. You can see as I start to type it, it starts to anticipate it. And I could put in the name of this field and rename. I'm going to rename it to JobCat actually. So it's called emp group there. So I'd just say emp, and you can see it immediately anticipates it because it says emp group should now be called JobCat. I put a question mark on. If you don't know what the command is, but you can guess the name of the command, like rename variable, just type the command in and then click the help button here, syntax help, and it will always take you to a little web page where it will show you an example. And that's usually all you need. You usually just need an example. So you can see there's an example of rename variables. See this, but the key here is I could do a whole list of variable names. So I could just copy and paste out all the var 001s through the var 002, just copy and paste them out and then run the rename variables command and give them all new names. So that would be an easy way to do it. So if I run that, I'm just clicking the play button here, the green play button here. You can see that's now called a JobCat. And if I wanted to copy and paste the field names, of course, so I go to variable view here, I mean, I can just highlight these and just copy them out. So I could copy and paste them into a piece of syntax and then just build a rename variables around that. So that's one of the first things to bear in mind. The second thing to bear in mind is you will get issues sometimes around what's called the level of measurement. The level of measurement is a statistical concept which tells SPSS what type of field it is. So for example, here I've got sal begin. That means people's beginning salary, as you might guess. And if I hover over it, you can see it's got the label beginning salary appearing there. If I hit descriptive statistics on that, it treats that appropriately because it just gives me the mean beginning salary, the minimum beginning salary, the maximum beginning salary. Next door to that, we've got salary, but it has been, you can see it's got a different symbol across the top. That's because it hasn't been formatted as a scale variable. You can see measure scale here. It says measure nominal. That's normally for a category field, and that's been incorrectly labeled as a category field, a sets category field, which means that if I do, for example, descriptive statistics with it, you can see that what it does, it produces this table of percentages because it's expecting categories. So again, changing something simple like that, I could double click on it. I'd go to measurement level here and I could click scale and it would change that to scale. Again, if I go to the syntax here, you should be aware that there's a command for that as well. So I could go variable level. And variable level, I could actually say, look, salary should have the variable level. You can see it's already scaled, but I could change it back to nominal again here. So I'll change it back nominal. And again, remember, I can search for this online. It will just give me an example. Run that, change it back to nominal. So again, if there's a whole bunch of them that you need to change, and you don't want to do it manually by going through the clicking, think about syntax and think about running a syntax job. Okay, another issue, things that you might want to do when you're testing the you loaded the data to begin with, is you might want to think about just right-clicking on it and just looking at it. So for example, if I look at descriptive statistics here, it'll give me some descriptives. If I look at age here and do descriptive statistics on age, one of the things that comes up is it says the minimum age is -9. and the maximum 62. That's very common when you're reading in data that has been formatted in another system, because the -9 probably indicates that the data's missing. It's probably a special code, what's called a user missing value. And SPSS won't know that if it's been in a third party, like a CSV file or something like that, or an Excel file. So I'd need to tell it that -9 is the missing value, because otherwise it's going to affect the mean. As we can see here, the mean here is 34.45. So if I want to tell it that -9 is the missing value, I'd just double click on that and I'd go to values here. Sorry, I'd go to, sorry, missing here, obviously. You can see you can have up to 3 discrete missing values or a range of missing values. I could go -1 to -999 or something like that. But I've only got one missing value here, I think, -9, click like that. And now if I rerun it, hit descriptive statistics, now you can see the minimum's 20 and the maximum 62, because it knows that there's 6 missing values in here. At least some of which must be the -9 value. Some might just be blanks. That'd be system, what they call system missing. And it does affect the mean. You can see the mean now is 34.73 rather than 34.45. And again, bear in mind, of course, that you might want to do that to a whole bunch of variables. You might have lots of variables that have the same missing value, -9, -99, in which case you could use a command, but you can guess what the name of the command is. You can almost guess it's missing values, and I'd go missing values, and I'd think, what is it called here? Is it what is the field that I'm trying to call? I think it's age. If I just type in age, and I put in age, yeah, you can see age is coming up there, and I could say age has the value -9. That would be my missing value, and I'd run that, and it'd assign my age missing values that's -9 there. And again, remember, if you want to see examples of other forms and ways in which you can apply missing values, you could have a variable list. You can have a list of variables. There's an example there. It's doing, variable 1, missing values 8 and 9, variable 2, 3, missing value 0, variable 4, missing value X, variable 5, 2, 9 has a blank. You can see that you can actually have characters as missing values, not just numbers. So it's important to know about that, because if you're going to have to clean the data and apply it to lots of procedures, that's a really useful procedure to have that up your sleeve to be able to run the syntax on it. What else have we got? Well, I've got a variable here called job time. I can see right away there's an issue with job time. Job time should be how many months they've been in the job. Okay, and I can see there's a little symbol A next to that. That means it's alphanumeric. That means it's a category variable. Sorry, that means it's a string variable because it's got the value X in there. And X obviously means it's missing at this stage. And obviously it's also set up as a category field. So if I do that, you can see, look, it's showing me the categories. It's showing me how many X's I have. It's actually got 3 blanks in there. So that's another problem I might want to do. I might want to actually change this and say I want to replace missing values with a I might want to turn this into a numeric field or something like that. So I can do that. If I turn it into a numeric field, I can just double click on it. If I change it from type string to type numeric, what will happen is, obviously if it's a number, it can't keep the X. So the X will be turned into uh, uh, effectively a system missing value if I click OK, which just means it's a full stop. And it's actually a number field too, so it's a scale field, so I could change the scale field to scale. And I could, if I decided, look, you know what, I want to actually replace. I don't want to have any blanks in here at all. I want to actually just replace that with the average. So if I wanted to replace it with the average, what I'd do is I'd go to transform, because I'm transforming the data here. Transform usually means you're going to do something to the variable. You're going to work on a variable some type. And I'd go down to replace missing values. This is used normally with time series data. So it's usually when you have like a forecasting application or something like that, where you're looking at, I don't know, a range of values over time. And you don't have the sales figures for a particular territory or something like that over time. So you can use the series mean because it's a series, or you can use the mean of nearby points and just say, well, I'm going to assume that it's the average of It's the mean ticking January and ticking March. I'll work out what I'll plug in the average for of those two values for February. But here I'm just going to use series mean, and I'm going to take up job time here. So where's job time? It's if I can't remember the name of the field, because it's obviously showing me the variable labels here. Okay, you can't switch. So just so it makes it easier. Here it's showing month since hire as a label. Like I say, this job time is the one I want to change that to. And you can see it's going to create that. It's going to create, based on series mean, it's going to create a field called job time one. So I could call it job time mean or something like that and hit change at that point. Click OK. And it creates a new field for me at the end here, which is job time mean. It insists that you overwrite, insists that you create a new version of the field. I could delete that one and say, do you know what? I'm just going to move this. I'm just going to drag it around, put it back in there, and then change the name of it back to just job time. And bear in mind, however, that the label, the variable label, it's put in S mean. So I could say month since hire again. And again, you could apply a label through syntax if you wanted. So you can automate all of this through syntax. So this is another typical issue. I'm replacing the means with the series mean. What about date of birth? So a really typical issue that you have is something to do with dates or times. And this is a real bugbear for anybody working with any platform, whether it be R or SAS or Stata or Q or Statistica, Minitab, all even Excel, they all encode data slightly differently. And they encode particularly dates and times differently. And often you'll get away with it. Sometimes systems generally try to make a guess as to what a date time is, but here, for whatever reason, you can see the A symbol again. It hasn't been imported for whatever reason. It hasn't been imported as a date symbol. It's actually just imported that as a string. So this might just be, email addresses as far as it's concerned, or postcodes. It doesn't know that that's a date. So one thing you can do is you can double click on it, and you can try this. You could try and change it to a date field. And you can see here's all the different formats. You could try and match the format and say, look, it's day, day, month, month, year, year. And indeed it is. It's day and then month, 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 MMM, meaning it's the shortened version of the month. And then the full year in 4 digits, not just the last 2 digits of the year. So you could try that and see if it works. And you could even potentially copy it and maybe paste it and try, give it a new name called DOB2, and just try it and see if it works. You might get away with it. In this case, it turns out I think you do get away with it. I think it actually, no, it doesn't. No, it didn't work. There you go. It didn't work. And maybe I used the wrong formatting, but you can see I took a copy of it for that very purpose because I wanted to kind of, in case it didn't work, I wanted to keep it. So um uh if I maybe I didn't copy and paste it properly. Let's try copy. Try paste. Maybe I didn't copy and paste. Maybe I just copied the name across this. Double click on it. Try it here again. I kind of expected it to work. Yeah, it did work. Yeah, I just must have just copied the name, not the actual field itself. So this would be DOB2. So you can sometimes get away with it. The point is, and I can see that that's a date field. It's actually got a little symbol next to it. It would normally be a scale field. And it's actually a proper date field. I know it's a proper date field because it's a number field. I can just tell from the formatting, it hasn't got the A symbol next to it. Now, if that doesn't work and you find that, look, that's not working, you may have to try a different route. And it turns out the SPSS does have a really nice little procedure under the transform menu called Date and Time Wizard. Okay, and it helps you deal with all things to do with dates and times. And one of the first things it does is it tells you, for example, how dates and times are represented in SPSS. In Excel, dates and times are the number of seconds elapsed, I think, from the 1st of January 1900. And in SAS, it's the number of seconds elapsed from the 1st of January 1960. And in the SPSS, it's actually the number of seconds elapsed since the October 14th, 1582, which is the introduction of Gregorian time. So if you take a date field and you turn it into a numeric field, if you actually force it and turn it into a numeric field, and it's a date field, it will just show you a really long number, which is just the number of seconds elapsed. And if you take one date away from another, it will return the time to you in seconds, which you would then convert into months or days or whatever. Unless, of course, you wanted to use the date and time wizard, in which case it makes it much easier. So you can do things like calculate with dates and times. You can create a date at time from variables holding parts of date at time. Sometimes you get a data set that's been imported and it's got the days, the months, and the years as separate fields, and you could combine them together using this tool. Or you can see here, create a date or time variable from a string containing a date or time. Well, this is a string field. This is character string. And if I click on it there, it actually scans it and shows you the first few values and it says, okay, pick a format for the way which you want to represent this. So I'm going to pick that first format there, the month. The month is FEB MAY, so it's MMM, and the year is 4 digits. If I hit next at this point, you can see again, it won't let me override it. I'm going to call it, date of birth. And I'm going to give it an employee label, a label here, which is employees date of birth. And then it tells me what the output format's going to look like. I could change the format. It doesn't have to be the same format, the output. But I hit finish at this point. It runs that. It will give me some error messages here when it runs that. I'll explain what that's about in a second. But it just turns out that some of the data, as we'll see in this file that has a plethora of problems of it, some of the rows in the data set are actually just blank. There's just nothing in them. We've got to deal with that later. And it's saying, look, it's basically say some of these cases, case number 76, case number 80, and case number 83, it says, I don't know what to do with those because they don't have any values in them. So you can see there's date of birth that's been created. I could then just delete the original one. I could move this around and change it. You can reorder the variables using syntax as well. So that's another problem I've dealt with there. If I just click on that and move that about, um, I've now changed my string date of birth into a proper formatted date of birth field. So I can see that that's actually correctly formatted now. If I do descriptive statistics on it, it will actually try and give you the minimum date of birth and the maximum date of birth, who was the youngest and the oldest, and what, even the mean date of birth, what the average date of birth is. So that was the first set of examples that we have there. We're dealing with data formatting problems, really. We're not really dealing with mistakes in the data. It's just how the data has been imported, probably from a third-party system. We've had to deal with change things from numeric from string to numeric. We've had to rename things. We've had to tell it what is a missing value. We've had to tell it what the level of measurement is, that it's not a category field, that it's a scale field. We've had to make sure that the string date of birth is set properly as a date field. I actually have a series of little YouTube videos, little short YouTube videos that help you deal with string data and recoding string data. Getting data brought in as character string is often a real problem in SPSS. And fixing it and turning it into the proper formatting so that it's numbers and everything's in the right order, for example, can be a bit involved if you don't know how to do it properly. So I've actually got a series of videos using the recode command. I think there's 3 examples in there of 3 different methods you can use to recode string data. So we haven't got time to go into that today, but it's something that you might want to look at if you are dealing with issues around character string data and trying to get that correctly formatted in SPSS. That leads us to the second section where we're looking at problems with the data itself. So problems with the actual data itself. And it turns out we've actually got a very nice inbuilt procedure that helps us deal with this. If we go to the data menu this time, not the transform menu, but the data menu, and we go down to what's called validation, we can validate the data. And validating the data is this little tool here, this little procedure here. It just helps us run a series of common checks against the data and common procedures that we might want to run. and looks for common problems. And that's why it's so useful. It looks for common problems. It's a really, really handy little procedure to have here. So let me just have a look at that. Okay, so what's the first thing it's doing? It's saying, have you got a case identifier? Have you got some sort of unique ID? And it turns out I have. I've got employee code here, so I'll tell it that. It says, have you got variables that you want me to analyze anyway? And I'm going to say, yeah, I have actually. I've got all these different variables I want you to just have a look at. And if I click OK at that, it's going to run a series of basic checks. And we can see the basic check that's going to run in the basic checks tab here. So it's going to flag any variables that fail the following checks. It's going to say, I'm going to point out anyone where the maximum percentage of missing values is 70% or more. I'm going to point out any variables where 95% of the data or more all belong to a single category, or where you've got what's called too high degree of cardinality, where you've got variables where all the categories are quite unique to one another. You got 90% have a category count of 1, where you've got very little variation in the data, where it's all kind of similar values. I'm going to flag in any incomplete IDs, because I've got your ID field here. I'm going to flag any duplicate IDs. I'm going to flag any empty cases, any cases where everything but the ID is shown, or it's anything but the ID is actually is actually empty. And I should bear in mind here that you can actually save these. You can actually ask it to save these and say, save out the empty case, the duplicate and the empty case indicator and incomplete indicator. So it will actually save them as fields for you as well, in case you don't want to manually go through the output of the report searching for the problematic records in there. So I'm going to click OK at that and run that. And what we see is right away it says, look, you've got a field here where 95% of the data all have the same values, and it's a field called city. So that's this field here, city. And if we look at it and click on descriptive statistics, we can see why. It's actually there's 3 blank, and the rest are all just labeled Chicago. And that is not unusual when you're importing data, particularly if you're taking data off a database, because you often get fields which are what we call invariant, and obviously there's nothing I can do with that. It's no use to me, so I might just delete that and say I don't need that field because it hasn't got any variation. I've got some here where it says you got an empty case. Let's look at the report on that first of all. Empty case, and it says, okay. Let's see, the empty duplicate cases. It says, first of all, incomplete identifier. That is case number 479. Where's that? Case number 479. If you scroll down here. So yeah, case number 479, as you can see down here, doesn't have an ID field. So it's saying you've got an incomplete identifier. It's actually marked that one. You can see it's identified that. And so if you had lots of them, you could, if you wanted to, you could just say sort in ascending or descending order, and it would just put all the ones of incomplete identifiers at the top. Well, I think that was case number 479. I'm going to guess it should have had the ID 479. Maybe I could look them up in some way. Incomplete, and then empty case. Let's do the same thing with empty case. If I sort in descending order here or ascending order here. Oh, actually, maybe what's happened here? Empty. Let's see. Non-empty. Non-empty. Is any of them empty? Maybe some of them have gone. Maybe I've got rid of them. Let's just make sure. Right click and hit descriptive statistics here. Okay, no, they're all non-empty. Okay, so we've got no. It hasn't found any empty cases. So that's good. Hit click on that point. And lastly we've got duplicate ID. So it's found some duplicates in the ID. You can see here that it's unique. If I go and look at these and look at the report and say where are these duplicates that you found, it says there's 2 duplicates and they have the IDs 20 and 21. The case number is 20 and 21, and they both have the employee code of 20. So I just scroll down here. I'm just going to sort this in order again. So we'll just scroll down to 20. There it is. There's case number 20 and 20. You can see that over here in duplicate ID, they belong to group one. So it's not that they're unique. It actually identifies, say, these guys belong to the same group. So it'll identify all. And I could say, look, I'll just get they're identical. It doesn't really make much difference how I get rid of them. You can notice that the gender variable here has been coded slightly differently as F and F. So I'll just get rid of one of them. I could just delete it to that stage, clear it. And I could actually now delete my duplicate ID identifier, if you like, and that would get rid of that as well. So all of that is done automatically through me, just through the basic checks. I'm going to switch all of these off now. Just through the basic checks that it's looking for. And it's been a worthwhile procedure to run because it's found a lot of common problems. So it's really useful in that sense. There's some other tabs here though that we can look at. You can see there's something here called single variable rules. I'm actually going to switch this off, switch all these off because I've kind of dealt with this. If I go to single variable rules, this is really useful because what single variable rules does is it gives you a little overview of the data. You can see it's got a little chart here on the side and it tells you what the minimum and maximums are. So I can see there does seem to be an issue here with gender because it looks like gender's got more than two categories in there, and that's probably because they've been coded as M and F. If I right click on this, you can see that they're coded as M and F, but sometimes they're in uppercase and sometimes they're in lowercase. And because they're strings, SPSS will see these as different categories. So uppercase, there's a few been coded as uppercase here, and there's a few blanks in there. So I might want to deal with that. What else? I'm just sorry, switch these off again. In single variable rules, if I look down through it, what I'm paying attention to are things like anything where you've got unusual minimums and maximums. So right away there, I can see that somebody has a problem with the number of years of education. Somebody apparently has 115 years of education. Okay. Now, it might be there's only one case there has 115 years of education, or it could be there's lots of cases that have more than, extreme number of years of education. So I might want to define a rule for that. I could define a rule and say, look, just create a rule. I'm going to call it ed check. And I'm going to tell it, look, minimum years of education, nobody should have more than 25 years of education. I'm going to make that assumption. Okay. I'm going to say, click continue at that point. And I've got a little rule called ed check here. And I could apply that rule to that field. See? So when I click, see, it's not applied to the other, it's just applied to that field there. So that's really useful. There's a few other things I could do here. If I went to cross variable rules, having looked down through these and checked them and made sure that they look all right, there's no wild values here. There's nothing too bad. There's nobody aged -9 or anything like that. Previous experience, 476 months they could afford. So I guess that might be an extreme value. It might not, but I don't know. Cross variable rules. Well, cross variable rules refer to situations where you got two values which are illogical. And I don't really have that in this data, but let's say I've got something which is a bit odd, which is I've got something where somebody's beginning salary is higher than their current salary, and that shouldn't happen. Now, of course, in reality, it could happen, couldn't it? Because it could mean that you start off in a high salary and then you go, I don't know, part time, or you get demoted, or you take a pay cut or something like that. You go to a different job. But let's say we just want to check it. So we're going to create a little rule here called sal check. This is a cross variable rule. You can have a whole bunch of these. And I'm just going to say the logical expressions should be, flag anything where salary is less than, I think the name salary is less than beginning salary. Sal begins. So that's my rule there. Hit continue. It's my field sal check there. And you can see it's going to apply that switched on now. And again, I can save these. I can save the rule validations and say, point out any rule validations. So it's a little report here it's going to create for me. Is there anything else? No, I think that's enough for now. Let's click OK at that point and just see if it finds anything. So it runs on, it says, OK, you've got one violation for salary, and you've got a violation here for ed check. So you've got case ID 15 and case number 147 have problems with them. So we can look at the rule violations here. We can again sort them in order and descending order. And there they are. There's somebody whose beginning salary is higher than their current salary. That doesn't look right. So that's why that violation. And there's somebody here whose education is 115 years. So that doesn't look right. I'm going to assume that should have been, I don't know, 15 years, something like that. Say we've gone and checked it. And say we've checked this and we say, actually, that's fine. There's no problem there. But they did actually take a pay cut or whatever, it went part-time. So this is how these are really useful procedures that we would run to check the data, and we can create our own custom procedures. You can see I'm sorting this back in ascending order, get back into the same order as before. Very useful, very powerful. There's other little things you could find which is problematic here. But before I get to that, I just wanted to point out again on the data, before we leave validation, if you click load predefined rules, it actually comes with its own predefined rules. And if you go back now to validate data and single variable checks, look, it's got loads of rules. You could say, if for whatever reason the variable, you've got a variable gender, you could check to make sure it's always got one character, not like two characters. A day of the week might be coded as 3 characters or as full. You might want to check that that's been coded correctly. Month, you might have month of 3 characters full. If you're working with US states, sometimes they use 2 characters, or UK postcodes or UK social class designation. It can make sure that these fit the pattern that's associated with them. So you can actually use some of these predefined rules, which again, very, very useful to work with. Other things you might find out in the course of analyzing the data is you might do a little analysis here. As I say, I tend to right click and look at things like descriptive statistics. I might notice, for example, we've got 3 interns here. And I might decide, actually, that's just too small. It's too much an exception to the rule. I'm not really interested in those cases. I want to get rid of those cases. And one way in which I can do that is I can go to data and select cases. Rather than manually getting rid of them, deleting them, I could say, well, look, if condition is satisfied, and I could say, look for these cases and its employment category, and then I'd say, select employment category. If it's not equal to, well, what's the code for intern? Let's go and check. So you can right click on it. It's code number 4. And say, if it's not equal to 4, then keep it. Click continue. That will filter the data in the data set. So the interns will be filtered out. If I then just check it to make sure it's working correctly. It's also got rid, it's actually got rid of, we can see there was some system missing data there. That's interesting. It's got rid of those 3 cases. You might want to keep those guys because it's actually got rid of them. So, because they're also not one of these groups. So I could go back and select this and say, if job cut is not equal to 4, select it, but keep the system missing or something like that. So anyway, it's kept these cases. If I was happy with that and said, look, I've got rid of them, I could just delete them, or if I wanted to be careful, and I could just copy them to another data set in the background and say no interns or something like that. Click no interns, you say. And now I've got a new data set. It's labeled. It hasn't got a file name, but it's got a little label called no interns in it. And if I right click and check that data set would not have any of the interns. I would see that they're gone from the data set. Or alternatively, as I say, if I'm feeling brave, I just go back to the original data set and say select cases and say, look, just delete unselected cases and say just get rid of everybody that isn't in that group, and I will have cleaned the data effectively doing that. And the last problem I wanted to point out was just sometimes this is a real common problem when you have string data. Sometimes you have things coded in upper and lower case, and you could use automatic recode, which will take string data and turn it into number code, but it will still treat these upper and lower cases as if they are separate. So F, lowercase f is separate category from uppercase F. So that is a problem. There are lots of ways in which I could deal with that. One is to use transform compute and compute a new variable called gender2. And you could use a special function here called upcase or something like that in string. So you could look at upcase in here and say, there's upcase, convert everything to uppercase or L case. You could say L case and it would convert everything to lowercase, you know? So that would deal with it. Or alternatively, you could go to and use a recode in the same variables. So that would override it. So I'm going to use recode in the same variables and just change the codes. All I'm going to do is say, look, capital M, I want that to be lowercase m. And any occurrences of capital F, I want that to be lowercase f. And that's all I need to do. I don't need to point to the other ones. I just say, look, if you see these two values, convert them or recode them, click OK at that point. Let's go back. Let's look at it. It's descriptive statistics. There you go, F and M. And I could then just label this up. I could potentially change these to numeric codes. Why might I do that? Well, some procedures, certain procedures in SPSS don't like string fields, certain statistical procedures. So I could use something like automatic recode. And let's just call it gender2 or something like that. So I'm going to call it automatic recode or gender num. How about that because I'm going to turn that into a numeric field. And it just recodes it in alphabetical order. Odd news. So click OK at that point, and you can see it just turns it into. It looks like it says M and F. It looks like nothing's changed, but you notice the little A symbols disappeared from it. What it's done is it's taking the original string values, and it's turned them into labels. So it's taking code 1 and 2, 1 for female, 2 for male, and I could double click on that, and of course I could change this to, of course, female and male, you know, so I could edit, clean it up. So now I've kind of cleaned my data set up and I could then delete the old one, etc., etc. This filter variable always remains there every time you do some sort of select cases where I went data select cases, it always marks which ones were selected from the last one. So if I did another select cases, it would just override it, but obviously I don't need it, so I can just delete it at that point. And having done that, I've kind of cleaned my data. Now, if I just hit File, New data here, to start with a blank data set, let's go to Output and close that down. So we start completely blank and go to Syntax, close that down. Through a combination of using the paste button or from just looking up what the syntax is, I could do all my data cleaning in one go. And this is what I would normally do when I'm working on a project of a customer or something like that. I would record all of the data cleaning I've done in syntax. So you can see here's me renaming the variable. We have, if you're not familiar with syntax, we've got a series of course, we've got webinar and syntax. You can go and you can look that up. We've got a recording of that. I've even got a series of little bite-sized chunk videos that teach you some basic syntax, useful stuff. You can see what I'm doing here. I'm assigning a missing value. I'm changing job time, alter type job time into a number. The date and time wizard, I didn't type all of this out. I just used the paste button in date and time wizard. So you can see it's got a little paste button. Every dialog box has got a little paste button. I've used delete variables to delete date of birth and city. I've pasted the filter that I did earlier on. And this stuff here, identify duplicate cases, that's all just been pasted from the procedure. I haven't typed most of this out. I've just hit paste. Point is if I run all, I can read the data, and it just reads the data in. It's going to give you some messages about problems that it's found, but the whole point about the data set was that there were problems in the data set to begin with. So, but it effectively just cleans it all for me and does it all in one go, which is obviously very powerful. Okay, so that's a tour through a number of procedures that one might run if you were cleaning the data itself, finishing up there with using syntax to clean the data as well. You should be aware that there are additional resources. We have lots of other webinars that we run on a regular basis, and you'll be able to look those up. But we also have video guides, just general video guides we've done on specific how-to topics. Sometimes they're analytical, sometimes they're kind of operational like this. You have information on the SPSS software, and we have a blog series, which is quite relevant for the next webinar where we're looking at statistical testing and significance testing. You should be aware, of course, that we have a consultancy service. We help people, build their, clean their data and teach them how to do that through training and support. And we also help with the recruitment of staff itself. You should be aware that if you have existing SPSS licenses, we can help manage your existing SPSS licenses. You can transfer your licenses to us. You can buy your analytical software directly from us, often with discounts. We generally offer no strings attached technical and business advice relating to all things analytical to all comers, whether or not you're a customer of ours or not. And for our own customers, we offer formal technical support services around the IBM SPSS product family. Also, SPSS Smart Vision customers get free access to our library of training materials, some of which are recorded. It's for self-paced training courses, some of which are courses which you can download with materials to teach yourself. In the meantime, I hope you found that useful. You should bear in mind that the next webinar that we're running, I think at 3 o'clock this afternoon, is where we're looking at statistical testing. If you do have any questions that occur to you afterwards, then please feel free just to email us, and we'll be happy to try and address them to the full extent. In the meantime, thanks very much for logging in, and we look forward to you logging in again in the future.